Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on this episode. We're going to talk about some really fantastic new stuff coming out of the Antelope Coalition, Instant Finality, and what it is and what it lets us do. And just super excited. We have Lukas from Wax and Guillaume from UX Network here. And I'm your good friend, Douglas. And let's get into it, because this is some real cool, mind-twisting, head-scratcher stuff, or can be. So maybe by the end of this, it won't be quite so scratchy of the heads. Guys, welcome. Thanks for coming in here and helping us understand instant finality and what it means for the whole Antelope ecosystem.
Good to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
We're going to rely heavily on you, Guillaume, because you are actually leading the development efforts around this, and other chains like EOS, Wax, Telos, but really all the chains using the Antelope Leap software will be able to take huge advantage of this. So do you want to give us a quick overview about what that is, about what instant finality is?
Absolutely. So I guess originally when we created the Antelope Coalition, all the representatives from the chains came together and they expressed what were their priorities in terms of joint development efforts, what they wanted to see accomplished. And we essentially created a system to weight these priorities between all of the chains. And the one that came out on top was the notion of faster finality at the time, as we called it, which was the idea of decreasing the time it takes when a block is produced for this block to reach status of irreversibility, of true finality in that sense. So we essentially determined that was our main objective, our first priority, and then we started working on this particular upgrade to the protocol. And then as we explored various options, we decided to implement a consensus model that's called Hot Stuff, which gives us, amongst other things, the benefit of very, very fast finality. So at that point, it was so fast that we decided to change the name from fast finality or faster finality to instant finality, because it really is instant for all practical purposes. It's like low single-digit seconds to reach finality, which in a web experience is pretty much instant.
It's also a different definition of finality than most people have been using it. And that's why when we started talking about fast finality, I wanted to encourage us to talk about what that really meant, because we were using a standard of finality, right, that was different than what everyone else was using. And they would say, hey, we are final in this many seconds or minutes or whatever, and we're so fast. And with Antelope, there's the probabilistic finality that almost everybody else uses, saying, hey, it's almost impossible that this would ever be rewritten. But there's also, that's what most people use, right? It's like, well, you'd have to rewrite all these blocks back from the beginning. But for us, we have actual finality, right? So Lukas, do you want to talk about that? Or when do you guys want to talk about what finality we have?
The way applications in Web3 space understand and build for finality is very different on different blockchains, right? So Ethereum, for example, achieves full finality within like up to 15 minutes, I think, and that's essentially where you reach that probabilistic state that you mentioned, that there is zero chance of irreversibility, right? Polygon, I believe it's up to 5 minutes, right? Antelope chains typically achieve that within 3 minutes, which means that if you're building an application that needs to have UX as close to what people are used to in Web2 space, you need to account for some pretty hairy use cases, right? Because typically when you look at like a typical mobile application, your response time has to happen within 2 seconds, right? Because if it happens beyond that, people just user experience is very laggy. People get bored and they exit. So what ends up happening is that if you're building applications in Web3 space, developers make an assumption, right? They are like, hey, what is the probability of the reversal within, let's say, 2 seconds? And I'm going to build my applications around that. And then I need to account for reversibility through some back logic, right? So you have some compensating transactions or user flows that would account for that. So I give you an example, right? Let's say you go to the marketplace, you purchase an NFT, and then it's within 2 seconds the application says, "Great, it's in your wallet, it's fantastic," right? And you think you got it, and then let's say 10, 15 minutes later there is a fork, and then there is that particular transaction gets reversed, which means that from a user perspective, you look at your inventory, you're like, what the hell happened, right? The NFT disappeared. Well, I got my money back, but still, you thought that you completed something and you really didn't. So, obviously probability of that happening is low. Having said that, it does happen. So a lot of Web3 developers have to account for that. And I think when we talk about this full finality being achieved within seconds, is very, very important. What's also very important I wanted to mention is that I think the whole Web3 industry is struggling with this technological shortcoming of blockchains in general. I think in EVM space, the latest buzzword is the ZK rollups or ZK EVMs and all that stuff, which is essentially EVM space answer to shortcomings of Ethereum chains and L2s in general. But what is important to say here is that ZK rollups essentially work by moving computational and state information off chain. So you essentially, there's a loss of information, right? So yes, you may be solving for increased finality, and I think like these ZK VMs will achieve 3 second type of full finality once they are live, but at the cost of loss of information, right? So you're essentially moving stuff into decentralized systems. And that's an important distinction to make here, because the instant finality that Antelope Coalition is working on does not suffer from that drawback, right? We are essentially saying that the Antelope core blockchain technology is gonna be as fast as these other solutions that lose information in the process. And we will
faster,
see
probably.
a 2 second finality, right? Yeah.
Everything you said makes a lot of sense, and I agree. There's one part that I think would be good to get a little more clarity on for people, though. So we're saying that Bitcoin classically had a probabilistic finality of like 30 minutes, right? They like three Bitcoin blocks, right? And we talk about Ethereum where it's like 60 confirmations is what most will use, and that's around 12 minutes. Those are still probabilistic, meaning that let's say aliens came down and had superior computation ability, or let's say that the United States' NSA turned all its computing power on these things. Like if a massive amount of computing power were to come in and change the dynamic, then those things could potentially still be changed, right? With everything we know, it's not really possible, it's not probable, but it could technically happen. Now, what happens is, so I think that Antelope chains currently reach that probabilistic at around a minute, less than a minute, really. You could say even 20, 30 seconds. We could talk about why, but it'd be boring. But the 3 minute mark that you're talking about, that's the difference between true finality, right? Meaning no matter whether the NSA or the aliens or the lizard people or whoever had the greatest computers, right, or the next AI, whoever points maximum computer power at an Antelope chain, beyond that 3 minutes, you still can't go back because of how transactions are done. So it's a different. So we're using a different definition of finality. And I agree with everything you say about how it's important that it happens quickly, and we're bringing it even more quickly. But when we were talking about this, when we were first calling it fast finality, and we had some internal chats about this, I really thought it was important for us to clarify for everyone that we're using two very different definitions, right? We're right now at about 3 minutes, we reach something that is completely, it's irreversibility. And at about 10, 20, something like that seconds, we reach the same level of probabilistic finality that you would find on Bitcoin in 30 minutes or Ethereum in 12 minutes, something like that.
It's a good distinction to make. Yeah, I think it's a good distinction to make. I think what's important here to remember is, it depends what kind of application you're building, right? If you are an exchange and there's real money being exchanged, then which number are you gonna use, right? And you see this, that all exchanges essentially work with the full finality, right? So you will not see the money in your account until that full finality is reached. So on Antelope, it's 3 minutes. On Ethereum, it's going to be 15 minutes. On Bitcoin, is typically an hour, right? But you're right, you can dial it back and assume certain level of risk depending on what type of application you're building, for sure.
So when we changed from already having pretty fast finality in those terms, right, to what I think of as instant finality, that is because not only are we going to in a couple of seconds have that same probabilistic finality, but we're going to have that irreversibility. Right? We're going to have both the higher standard, and we're going to have it in 2 seconds. Is that so? That's a paradigm shift, I think, in how we think of transactions. And like you said, that's really important for gaming. Guillaume, do I have that right? Are there any important distinctions that I'm missing there?
Close enough. I mean, it's important to see, to understand in blockchains like Bitcoin, for example, that depend on proof of work, or at least this kind of proof of work. They never reach true finality. Bitcoin never reaches true finality, as in it can always be reversed. Like there could be, like you mentioned, there could be maybe we don't know, but maybe the space aliens have been mining Bitcoin since the beginning of time on their own fork of the chain, and one day they'll reveal it, and it will basically revert all transactions back to Genesis.
Invented,
that's
so it's
theoretically that is possible. This is however small it may be, it is still a probability that is non-zero. So that's the nature of probabilistic finality. But when we talk about irreversibility or true finality or deterministic finality, which I think is the correct technical term, it means that we, as a network, as participants in the network, we reached consensus on this finality. So we reach an agreement that a certain block is final and that it will never be altered or reverted or modified in any way, shape, or form. So here it's quite important, because when we're talking about large scale transactions, when we're talking about maximizing user experience and preventing the kind of scenarios Lukas was mentioning, having this true finality, this irreversibility, is critical, because otherwise you always have that risk, and it may only happen 0.01% of the time, but that's still a lot if you're processing millions of transactions, right? Yeah. So I mean, you can't really have that occur every now and then. That just is bad UX.
The big picture to me is not only was Antelope technology always about the fastest in terms of probabilistic, it also had a second concept of finality, true finality or irreversibility, which meant that no amount of computational power applied to it could turn back the clock after what was called the last irreversible block, the LIB, which is usually about 3 minutes later. Now what we're doing, thanks to your work, is we are bringing that forward, that higher standard forward. So now it's only going to be 2 to 3 seconds, depending on some parameters, and it's going to be completely irreversible, right? So that changes it. That changes it to more match what most people's expectations of a transaction is to begin with, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's important to also to point out that this is just one of the benefits of this new consensus algorithm that we're adding there. Although it started as our objective was to achieve this faster, now instant finality, this algorithm that we selected also brings a whole set of new benefits on top of that, which we can also discuss.
Well, can you talk about that? So because those are exciting too. Obviously, the speed and the irreversibility are the headline, right? But it sounds like there's a lot of stuff in them, also in the story that is exciting stuff to learn about.
Right. So this consensus mechanism that we're upgrading Antelope to is called hot stuff. So hot stuff is essentially it's a Byzantine fault tolerance state replication algorithm, and it's a mouthful, but this is how it was essentially dubbed when it was created, and it was essentially created by VMware at the time with, I believe, the intent of using it for not necessarily for blockchain, but for state replication of servers or hard disk or VMs or other applications in the realm of computer science. Mm-hmm. And turns out that as people started looking into it, they realized that, hey, you know what, that works actually pretty well for blockchains too. And it was selected by Libra, which was the cryptocurrency project sponsored by Facebook that unfortunately didn't see the light of day, or maybe fortunately, who knows? But they did extensive research at the time, and they realized that hot stuff was probably the strongest consensus model that existed at the time. So when we started looking at different options to achieve instant finality, we rapidly figured out that hot stuff was the best one that was available, and that was also that kind of was in the sweet spot where it was very well documented and tested and reviewed, and like this is very high quality academic research that led to this. And it was also, there were also already implementations in the wild. There were already various people that did subsequent research and improvements over it, and so on and so forth. So we had a very good candidate that we decided to work on to integrate into Antelope. And now, several months later, we have essentially an implementation that is now being integrated in the core of Leap. So this is what we're working on these days, working on the integration of that hot stuff implementation that our team built.
So let's talk about how these changes enable different types of consensus models. For example, I think the big picture is that we could have more block producers, and also block producers can do different roles. Instead of right now, they currently construct and propose and validate blocks. But those three roles could be done in different groups, right? By different groups. Lukas, do you have? I would love to hear your thoughts about that and how that might be applicable to WAX or any other or theoretical Antelope chains.
For sure, separation of all these responsibilities is actually a good development. What we are observing on WAX is that having everything kind of bundled together makes it very difficult to become a block producer at the level of traffic that WAX is processing. So, so that high barrier of entry means that there is essentially less teams that are actually capable to take that task on, which means that managing the community of validators and block producers, making sure that we have high quality operators is a challenge, right? It takes a lot of effort. Being able to split these responsibilities into more specialized type of utilities means that your chain governance becomes a little bit easier, right? Like, it becomes more complex from a perspective of verification, and on Wax we have this concept of having this Office of Inspector General, which is this third party that constantly evaluates the performance of the standby and block producers, and then issue advisory to the whole chain in terms of who should be promoted and voted in. That function is going to be arguably more complex. Having said that, the benefit is that we will be able, and in any Antelope ecosystem really, will be able to onboard easier operators to specialize in these different areas, right? So that's a huge win for everyone, because hopefully there's just going to be a wider adoption from other projects and essentially infrastructure operators to be able to get involved with the Antelope ecosystem, right?
So it increases it increases the number of parties that could come in and provide infrastructure, like some or all of the functions of block producing, right?
Correct.
Right now,
Yeah.
anyone who wants to be a block producer has to do all three distinct functions. And that's very intensive, right? So if
Yep.
I'm understanding you correctly, and I think I am, so if you,
you're right. Yeah, exactly.
So, but the advantage then is if there's a high barrier to entry, it means that there's less decentralization. And as you say, well, maybe some people are going to come in and only do this thing, and some people will come in and do this part of it and this responsibility. And that aids decentralization because the barrier of entry is lower, and probably also aids resilience, has potential to increase resiliency, because you could have more block producers, or you just have more people participating in this. Is that
for sure?
Is that right?
For sure. Yeah. So on Wax we have 21 block producers, and I think we can have up to 30 standbys, and that list of standbys is really not fully even saturated, because there's just not enough operators that can do this type of work, right? I think with this enhancement, the different Antelope systems can actually experiment with saying, hey, maybe we're gonna have 51 block producers or more than that, right? Or different number in these various different pools, which does increase centralization. I think 2024 is going to be pretty exciting for us from that governance / ecosystem decentralization standpoint, for sure. And then we'll see what happens. Like, a good bellwether for us is going to be to watch that standby queue, and after this change, hopefully there are going to be teams competing to be a standby more than they are today, and there's just going to be naturally more competition to be an actual block producer or participant in the consensus mechanism.
Yeah, I think that's exciting. I think the economics of it will play into that, certainly. But sure. The risk I think is if we don't make it easier for new groups to come in, then you'll have what we already see in some places as a entrenched class of block producers, and nobody new can come in, right? And that's been a risk from the very start. Wax in particular, I'm not saying you have that situation. Wax in particular is the most challenging technically chain, I believe, for block producers to participate in, because you have so many transactions, you have so many stored, such a history, so many things happening all at once. I think it's a very challenging one. Perhaps EOS is more challenging. I don't know, but my guess is that it's Wax. So you guys are kind of the acid test for how easy it or possible or accessible it is to be a block producer. So
The,
I'll
the
definitely be watching
problem, yeah,
this.
it's definitely challenging because of the hardware requirements that are that are imposed on block producers to be able to number one, satisfy the RAM requirements for the chain, but also, and by the way, that's why I'm so excited to talk about the RAM improvements that we're working on with ENF also, but that's a different topic altogether. But yeah, and then also, you know, running the different node types. Uh, like I said, I mean, making sure that these functions are separated out, allowing people to specialize more, and then, you know, maybe not having to invest so much upfront capital for the hardware will result in, you know, greater adoption, more teams being interested to participate in the governance and consensus of Antelope chains, and then hopefully that will lead into, you know, better decentralization and competition between providers, right? Which is ultimately better for our networks, right? And for sure for WAX.
Yeah. Can you foresee a time in the next year where instead of 21 block producers, you have 40 or 50 or 100
Yeah,
or
potentially. Yeah, it all has to be. So I think technical aspect is definitely, and technical and operational aspect is definitely that's just one side. I think also tokenomics and governance is a huge part of that. So you know, it's easy to say, oh, we're going to have 51 block producers, but it's, I think, easier said than done. I would even argue that technically it's easier sometimes to solve with technology, and then the governance and generating consensus within the community and solving for tokenomics is actually much harder because you know, such move means that, you know, either you have to pay out more from tokenomics or the existing pie gets smaller for everyone, right? So
yeah.
at the end of the day, I think having that tool in a tool bag is very good, and I think we would definitely look into increasing the number of block producers, but that would have to be also backed up by increased you know, demand from teams saying, hey, I want to be part of this ecosystem.
Yeah.
I want to be a block producer, right? Hopefully we will see that, and then we can essentially start playing around with increasing the number of spots. But then, you know, we will have to also solve some pretty interesting tokenomics questions as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, like the adding to the block producers, the number of block producers is definitely one of the options that we now have with Hot Stuff. But as we discussed a bit earlier, we were also saying we can now start thinking about splitting the roles of different, of a block producer into different sub roles, and eventually coming up with different mechanisms to select who is going to be performing these various roles. And that's very exciting as well. For example, now with Hot Stuff, what we're doing is we're splitting the role of a block producer into three sub roles, which we call block proposer, block finalizer, and consensus leader. So right now, the block producer on an Antelope chain performs all three of these roles. But now, after this Hot Stuff upgrade, they will still perform the three roles, but we are essentially now in a position where we can start decoupling these roles and selecting who is going to perform these various sub roles with different mechanisms if we choose so. So, for example, there's a block proposer. Their role is to propose a block candidate to the network. There is a block finalizer. Their role is to vote on the block proposals that they receive and determine which ones are should be followed, essentially should be added to the chain. And then we have the consensus leader, who is essentially compiling all of these votes that the network is producing for finality of the blocks, and it's compiling them into what we call quorum certificates. So all of these different roles now can be performed by different entities, and it starts making a lot more sense when you start looking at who the actors are, to give these responsibilities to different groups. So, for example, a block proposer, they have to be very well aware of the state of the network. They have to run the big infrastructure. They have to essentially like be able to process all these transactions as they come in. But they are not necessarily the ones that should be taking the decisions on finality, or that should be aggregating different votes together. I would argue that the entities that should perform the vote on finality of blocks should be not necessarily the biggest infrastructure providers, but they should definitely be the biggest, let's call them like economic actors in the network. And as you can imagine already, this is already kind of like showing in a sense that there's a need for something like this, because you have all of these big exchanges and big, let's say like staking as a service companies on the US that have very, very significant holdings of tokens. They have a very, very big economic stake in the network, but they don't really have the technical know-how to run all of the infrastructure that's required at scale with like maximum performance and all of that. Like that typically will be more the purview of these very technical teams, but typically these very technical teams also don't have all of the economic substance in the network. They don't necessarily are sitting on millions of tokens like the big exchanges are. So I feel like this gives us an opportunity here to start looking at these various type of organizations and giving them better suited roles that fit better with what their strengths and their responsibilities are. That to me is a very good example of how we can use this upgrade as a way to kind of reimagine how we assign work between the different participants in the network. And the third role, the consensus leader, this is also a role that is quite interesting, because this is essentially the role of synchronizing the network in a sense of making sure that everyone talks together and they can reach finality, that the network can reach finality quickly, and so on and so forth. So that responsibility really, to me, should be delegated to whoever are the entities on the network that are the best connected to, like, at the core, at the center, from a topological perspective of the network. Like, who is the team or the infrastructure operator, for example, that has connections with everyone? If you were to map like all of this, the best peering, the best meshing, essentially the lowest latency, the more replication across different continents, across different geographical areas. So that, like, if we start thinking of the network in more of a, I guess, traditional high performance network topography and topology, it starts making a lot more sense as we integrate these new features into the protocol to start building the network the way it should be, not just with these arbitrary rules that we have right now that don't really make sense. So this stuff upgrade, I think, gives us a lot of room for optimizing our networks in many ways, on the technical side, but also on the social and governance and economic sides as well.
Yeah. So once we do that, we'll have to figure out how to pay those different roles as well.
And I mean, these are of course discussions that go well beyond the technical aspects of what we're doing here. But it's important, I think, for us as developers that are building the software stack. It's important to present the options and then to let the various communities decide and discuss between them how they should configure their networks, their platforms to essentially leverage these options in a way that makes sense for them.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the reasons why DLT and DAOs and all these things have to be a nexus of people who understand technology, economics, and politics, interpersonal, social behavior. It's right, because you can't divorce any one of those from that, right? You can say, okay, well now we can technically do this. What's worth more? And of course, everyone's gonna think that their part is worth the most. Everyone's going to argue for how indispensable they are, and some people will say, hey, well, we should have as many block producers as possible because that's great. It's like, well, but if we aren't, there's some sweet spot where they're getting enough pay to do these roles, right? And so probably there will be a lot of missteps along the way. It makes it an exciting space, but as we make those changes, hopefully we'll make small incremental changes and learn from that.
We also can experiment, right? Like there's so many. This is a software stack that can be used to create, as we discussed on other calls, side chains, for example, that we can use to create new experimental ways of reaching consensus, and then figure out which one work and adopt them elsewhere. So this is to me it's always important to have the option, and then we can decide. I mean, if you have the option, you can always say no, right? You can always go back to the way things were before. At least you do have that option. If you don't have the option, then there's no way you can even explore what is possible.
Exactly. So let's talk about what's next. We think this is going to be live before the end of the year, or we can talk about when that happens. And then after that, the really exciting things that happen, I think, are what Lukas was mentioning, that we will approach management of RAM, because that's equally important and huge opportunity area for development for Antelope Coalition.
Right. So in terms of timelines for instant finality, there's a few things to consider. First of all, this is an upgrade that touches many components of the software stack. So, for example, it affects Leap, Node.js itself. It affects the contract development toolkit. It affects also the system contracts that each of our chains are running, and then also affects other ancillary, infrastructure such as IBC and the other IBC related infrastructure that currently exists. So there's quite a few steps to reach, let's say, full activation on all of the chains of this feature. It will be an incremental process. In terms of the Leap code base, we're planning to complete the integration sometime over the next few weeks. So we're thinking around September 22nd or something like that. We should have the Leap code merged, essentially like the hot stuff protocol merged into Leap. There's then a few other things that need to be done. We're going to essentially deploy this to the test nets first. We're going to test this thoroughly. And we also have to integrate this into, like I said, CDT. We have to update IBC to support that. We have to also prepare updates to the system contracts of all the chains. And then all of this has to be deployed by the block producers on each of these chains, has to be activated. The feature has to be activated by the block producers. And it has to also be essentially called by the system contract to kickstart the new consensus rules. So we're expecting this to happen, in the case of EOS, to happen in early December of this year. In the case of the other chains, we'll see, but typically it usually happens a few months later in these other chains. So and that is, of course, at the discretion of the block producers. So we can't really say when that's going to be. But in the case of ES, they're planning to do this in early December, and I would expect the other chains to follow suit for Q1 or Q2 of next year. So that's what we're looking at in terms of timelines for now. Also, as part of this upgrade, there is another critical piece of technology that is being introduced, which is the BLS cryptographic intrinsics. You were talking about ZK systems earlier. So now we needed that as part of the instant finality upgrade, but this is now also merged into the Antelope code base. So we're really excited to to see that in action. I know the question was not related to that, but as I was explaining it, it came to mind, so I figured might as well mention it. So this is also very interesting because it opens the door to all of these various confidential transaction schemes that some of the chains have implemented, and now we have that at the core of Antelope. We're able to plug that into smart contracts. We're able to essentially make use of these systems in DEXs and AMMs and order books and so on and so forth. So that becomes very interesting as well.
Yeah, that's exciting. Lukas, let's talk about RAM, because that's the thing that I believe in our coalition meetings we've decided is going to be our big push. We're transitioning into that. It's not like we're waiting for this to finish and then we're doing that. We're moving in that direction now. That's the next bite we're taking. Can you tell us why it's important and what you're seeing on Wax and what all the other chains will see as we catch up?
For sure. So just as a quick background, I guess RAM is one of the resources that is part of the Antelope core blockchain stack that just kind of enables storage and storing data on chain. The reason why it's important is because some use cases are obvious, right? Let's say you are creating NFTs. NFTs can have attributes. You need to pay for storage of those attributes. What not everyone knows necessarily is that creation of blockchain account also consumes RAM, which means that Antelope chains in general have a challenge to solve, meaning, if you want to grow to billion accounts on chain, today that is, not physically possible. There isn't, and we talked about block producers, right? So today the node operator, they need to supply hardware that is able to store. Essentially, the whole blockchain state has to be stored in memory, right? Which means that Wax block producers have a challenge because they need to run very expensive machines that have a lot of RAM, and as you know, there's a limit in terms of what kind of hardware you can procure. So today Wax has about, I think, 14.5 million accounts. Plus we have about, I think, 380 million NFTs minted on chain. So all that stuff adds up to a pretty significant chunk of RAM that node operators have to provide. And seeing the rapid growth of the chain last year, we actually imposed artificial barriers so that we wouldn't grow at a crazy rate of 30,000-50,000 accounts per day. Now, given a lot of that was coming from bots at the time because of the play to earn and all these different mechanics. But ultimately, we want to get to a point where, we don't have artificial barriers to account creation. We make it as easy as possible for people to create accounts, which kind of feeds into this user experience adoption, right? Like we want as easy adoption as Web 2.0 applications, right? So solving the RAM problem is very, very important, not only for Wax, but also for everyone else, right? If your goal is to be mass adoption, if your goal is to have billion accounts on chain, then this has to be solved, because without having that solution, there is a technical limitation today preventing us from accomplishing that goal, right?
Well, let's break this down for users a little bit more, because every computer user understands to some extent what RAM is. and has for a long time. And a lot of them say, well, I'll just put another 8 gigs of RAM in my computer. Why can't you do that? And so I think we want to explain a bit that if we add another gigabyte of RAM, right, that means that it means that first of all, this is much more expensive RAM than you'd probably put in your home computer. And that every operator has to put all that amount into every node that they're running, not just block producers. So block producers have to put it onto API nodes, block producer nodes and seed nodes and API nodes and history nodes and things like that. But then exchanges that run their own node also have to do it in any app that does it. So it's multiplying that problem of RAM by many more computers, right? Because I think there's a temptation to say, well, why don't the block producers just why don't the block producers just add a little bit more RAM? What could a banana cost, Michael? $20?
Right.
It's so what's this? Can you help people understand the scale of the problem just a little bit more?
It really comes down to the current technology and what is the possible addressable memory space for a given operating system, right? And there are limits to that, and also while there are limits to that, and as technology advances, obviously the goalpost gets moved. But we are talking about we're talking about also the cost, right? So I know that quite recently, for example, we with the bear market and the token prices and everything, we actually had to implement certain mechanisms in our tokenomics to ensure that block producers get paid enough to be able to even afford running the infrastructure. And our lower limit on wax is about $10,000, right? So we have this tokenomics mechanism, we call this USD pegging, where we say, hey, no matter what the token price is, we're going to make sure that block producers get at least $10,000 US, so they can cover their hardware costs, which is about $5,000 to $7,000, and then be able to afford one person salary to kind of manage all that stuff, and that's a lower tier. I believe that current operators are running servers with I want to say 120 gigabytes of RAM minimum. But that's a minimum. You have to have more than that, and those things are expensive, and that's operating at, like I said, 14 million accounts, close to 400 million NFTs on chain. All this operation happening, about 20 million transactions per day. 500,000 daily active wallets, right? So that's kind of the minimum infrastructure. Now, 14 million accounts is nothing in comparison to like a modern day gaming, right? I mean, there are games out there that have 150 million active users, right? So if you're talking about developing gaming applications that have mainstream adoption, you gotta have a technology that is able to scale to 500 million accounts, 1 billion accounts on the chain, right? Yeah. And current technology would not allow us to scale probably beyond, 200 million, 250 million accounts. Beyond that, you're gonna hit a hardware wall. Not to mention that before you even get there, from the operational perspective, you will not be able to run the node. Today on Wax, if you're starting a fresh node, let's say you did some maintenance and you're starting a fresh node from Snapshot or whatever, it is going to take you 45 minutes. It takes 45 minutes for a node to suck all the stuff that it needs from the disk into the memory and then start catching up, right? So starting a node, it takes 30 to 45 minutes. Then it needs a couple of hours to catch up with whatever transactions are needed in order to be able to even be in a state to perform block production, right? So changing that is very important. ENF is right now executing on a project which is essentially looking at the technology stack, and they're going to issue certain recommendations. We on Wax, we're obviously very interested in that because we're kind of at the tip of a spear as far as the RAM problem is concerned. But like I said, this is an issue for everyone in the ecosystem. If you want to scale to 1 billion users, this is your problem as well, right? You're going to hit that wall sooner or later. And, the plan is we're going to be meeting with folks from ENF on a technical side, I believe, on the 11th of September. Our team is going to take their recommendations, and I am making sure that we're freeing up bandwidth on our blockchain protocol core side of things. We have some developers there that I'm going to free up from projects, and we're going to run some experiments. We're going to take the recommendations from ENF, and we'll see what we can actually implement, experiment with, and then feed that back into Antelope community for collaboration, and hopefully we can solve that problem by summer of 2024. I would like to be sitting here in the summer of 2024, remove any sort of friction from account creation, and focus on user acquisition and adoption of the mainstream consumers just in time for the next bull run to start towards the end of 2024-25, beginning of 2024.
All right. And you're also making a call on when the next bull run starts. It's that's
this is not a financial advice, guys.
Guillaume, what's your take on what's your prediction on when the next bull run starts?
I mean, again, not financial advice. It's going to be interesting to see this time because, not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but one thing that changed in the recent, 24 months is we've seen the interest rates go back up. In the history of crypto, interest rates have always been going down. And a lot of the narrative around the importance of crypto, decentralization, protection against debasement of currency, and so on and so forth, has been a response to these, lowering interest rates. So now we can see a bit of a different macro environment that changes quite a few things. This being said, there's definitely tremendous development happening in the space right now, and I feel like we might start decoupling from the previous patterns that we've seen in the crypto market, and now, of course, with huge players like BlackRock trying to get an ETF out and for Bitcoin and things like that, it might very well trigger the mother of all bull runs. So it's a bit of an uncertain time, but I feel like it's definitely like there's a good probability that we see something moving reasonably soon. So in terms of timing, I would say 2024 is my bet. I'm not as confident in that one that I've been in previous bets that I've made, but that would still be my bet. Sometime like Q2, Q3 of 2024 would be the beginning of the next bull run.
And Lukas, you were Q3, Q4 of 24?
Yeah, I was saying towards the end of 24, beginning of 25, and that's just, I think, being very conservative. Another interesting data point here is that if you look at 2022, when we're entering bear market, and if you actually look at what venture capital firms were advising their Web3 portfolio companies is to have running operating cash until Q1 of 2025, because they were essentially saying, hey, we are seeing obviously contraction of the space, and any new funding essentially liquidity for funding is not going to be as widely available until the beginning of 2025. So if you kind of look at those data points, um, it's I hope it happens early in 2024, and we all kind of get out of these doldrums. But when we saw what's happening in the market, I mean, we went through some pretty painful reorganizations on WAX side. We had to downsize, we had to restructure, we had to do everything possible to preserve the operating capital, and then still to be able to build and contribute, right? And then we did that with kind of having that we gotta be able to survive way beyond 2025, right? So that's
I think that's really smart. This is still a new emerging space. If you want to be responsible, you have to make sure that you have the funds to stay alive no matter what happens. I would say, I think that there's cycle shortening as people become more and more aware of the crypto cycles, the typical cycles. They anticipate them, and therefore certain events are brought forward. So that, even though I would think that it would be more towards late 24, that suggests to me that it's probably going to come forward a bit. I would also say, though, that we have not hit max pain at all. So I have no idea. Not only is this not financial advice, I don't even know what I'm saying. But I would say, but at least I know I don't know. I would say I think I wouldn't be shocked if Q2 of 24 saw some significant rising action, but that there would be a lot of chop and wobble between now and then, and it will not, no matter what happens, it will not be a steady line in any direction. That's my prediction.
I have to tell you, another facet to this is really, when our companies are going to start running out of money, right? So I think there's been already very significant consolidation in the space, and we can see that, projects that have been operating on Hopium are out of business already. We are starting to see this critical time where, people who have done very well during the bull run, but didn't really, forecast, and they didn't really have enough, operating capital to survive this time. We're going to start seeing some companies going through tough times. I mean, we already seen, restructuring and reduction in force and all this other stuff, things slowing down. But I think as we are pushing through this bear market, it is going to be tougher and tougher for certain companies to survive, right? And it's very tough to see. At the same time, I think there's been a lot of irrational exuberance during the bull run, and to be honest, Web3 space became just stupid, right? Money was being thrown after things that just didn't make sense in my mind, and I was kind of scratching my head, and it was all really driven by massive speculation and quick profit taking. So the fact that we're going through this reset is actually good for the space, I believe, and people who are going to be standing here a year from now, year and a half from now, are actually projects that truly provide value, and that's important to call out.
Yeah. What one would hope, but real value creators like Floki and and mugshot Pepe coin, those.
That's right.
Those are by the time this video comes out, those old people have all forgotten that, I agree. I think that guys like us but who really are very much here for the tech without the finger quotes. I mean, we're talking about really sort of heady stuff that is future looking and stuff like that. But what we really see is most people are here just for the hope, the sucking the hopium hard, and they don't care about the tech, and projects that do well are not necessarily the ones that are leading in tech. They're the ones who are leading, who got there earlier. They're the ones who have more community building and all the things, like the EOSIO Antelope bet that superior tech would translate into economic success has so far failed. Right? Let's be honest, because we really, not only do we already have the best tech and have for a long time, and I'm not bragging, that's just factual, right? You could run a lot of, you could run any metric, but here we're talking about how we're actively improving these things, and yet you don't see that reflected in market caps and things like that. So is that going to change, or is that
we'll see.
And how do we stay alive as developers if that doesn't?
So my take on this is that I think that in Web3 space, the only metric that matters when it comes to judging project success is market cap, which to me it's very interesting because that particular metric, in my opinion, is heavily manipulated by a lot of projects through market making and buying back their tokens using VC money and all that stuff. At the end of the day, if I were to use Wax as an example, and Wax is now processing probably 2 times the total of transactions of all other blockchains combined daily, right? So that's a testament to Antelope Tech, but also a testament to the fact that this stuff actually can work at scale. And by the way, that is fraction of what we're capable of. Not to mention that now with IBCs, we can pretty much scale infinitely with sidechains, right? But
Wax is the most used blockchain on terms of daily transactions in the world, but it is not the highest market cap blockchain.
No, we are not even in the top 100, right? So which means that the tech and the utilization and all the metrics that in a Web2 space, when you're evaluating a company that is in let's say in Web 2.0, right? Like you want to know what is your how daily active users, monthly active users, right? Lifetime value of the customer, like all these different metrics are used to truly evaluate the value of the company. So you would think that the same metrics would apply in a Web3 space, like daily active wallets, the number of transactions, monthly active wallets. That is completely disconnected from the market cap. And I think the reason for that is, number one, what I said before, which is a lot of tokenomics get very manipulated, number one. But number two, I think ultimately the concept of tokenomics for blockchains in general is broken, because one should ask a question: what is a business of blockchain? How does blockchain make money to be sustainable business, right? And we are trying to address that on Wax now. We're looking very hard on our tokenomics, and we are trying to connect the activity on chain with being able to pay the bills associated with running the network, right? If you're not able to do that, then your tokenomics is essentially broken.
And that's the case. And that's the existential risk that we actually face, even as a coalition, right? So correct. I didn't mean to draw us in this direction, but I actually think we organically got somewhere that's very important. And we have been talking in these series of videos, as well as the actual work of the Antelope Coalition. We have been talking almost entirely about technical development, right? And yet, right here, we're saying that that's not actually the driving factor of survivability or success of a blockchain. So, what I'm going to suggest is we wrap now. But I would love to have this conversation, because we keep kind of pretending like it's all about the tech, and maybe mostly for us it is. But I also think that the four of us who are doing these conversations have a lot of understanding about what we were talking about before, that there really are three legs to that stool that they have to be working in conjunction. They have to be reasonably the same length, or else you get a very tippy stool, right? So there's the economic, there's the tech, and there's the governance. And if we don't put those all together, then we can't hope to ultimately succeed. And when we started the Antelope Coalition, I feel that we focused on the tech because that was the most pressing need. But as we've just discussed here, and I think, Lukas, you've made a compelling case, and I don't think either of us are going to disagree with that, right? There are these economic and maybe later governance, but especially the economic piece, it cannot be removed from that and still have the patient survive. So I think that we've done a lot of talk in Antelope about the tech. And I think we originally came together and said, hey guys, let's fix this tech because we all need it. But let's all worry about our own governance and economics. And the tech has been incredibly successful. And so now I'd almost raise the idea that, well, why don't we turn our thoughts and our communal resources to some extent to understanding why is WAX the highest transaction blockchain in the world, and not amongst the highest market cap? Why is that true of all of the Antelope chains essentially? So I think it'd be really interesting if we at least look at. We should
have that conversation. I'm willing definitely to have a separate meeting about that. The one harsh truth is that what's free is not valued.
Yeah.
So free transactions, free operations, or near free transactions, like flawless technology that just kind of works and you don't have to pay anything. At the end of the day, free is not valued, right?
Yeah,
and that's
we thought it was.
We
thought it was going to be that was going to be the killer app of EOS.io Antelope, right? But you're absolutely right. I just think that four smart guys could have an interesting conversation about and all the other people involved in the Antelope Coalition as well. I'm just talking about our videos. Maybe we could get to the bottom of something, and I think that becomes a very pressing problem for us, because if you're right that everybody needs to hold on to cash reserves to 2025, that's a ways in the distance, and it could be scary. And maybe since we've been so successful on working together to increase our tech, perhaps if we consider expanding our mission to figuring out ways that we could all thrive well, that would be a great next direction for Antelope Coalition. I'd like to see it, and I'd like to at least talk about it with you guys and Eve, and I think the community might be interested in that too.
For sure.
Thank you so much for being here. I love that we keep having these conversations. They get more interesting every time to me, and can't wait for the next one.
Good to see you guys as always.
Likewise. Thanks, Brad.
Take care.